Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act as tensions in Minnesota rise. And the White House condemning anti-ICE rhetoric. Mario Tsu standing by with the latest. Some European countries are sending troops to Greenland. Ariane Pasdar has more on the goal of the deployment and how the White House is responding. The protests in Iran appear to have quieted down. This comes after more than 12,000 people were reportedly killed and 18,000 arrested. Jason Perry with the update.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump threatens to invoke the Insurrection Act, calling the anti-ICE protests in Minnesota a travesty. And the White House doubles down on defending law enforcement. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mario Tsu at the White House. Mari, good evening.
Tiff, good evening. That's right. And tensions have been rising in Minnesota since that ICE-involved shooting last Wednesday. That's when an ICE agent struck by a protester's car, then fatally shot that protester, Renee Good, through her window. DHS is now confirming that that agent suffered internal bleeding to his torso from the vehicle's impact. And now there's been a second ICE-involved shooting in the same city in just 1 week. The White House saying that an agent shot an illegal immigrant in the leg out of self-defense after being attacked with a shovel by the immigrant and 3 of his comrades. And meanwhile, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, said this last night about ICE in his state. Take a look.
Let's be very, very clear. This long ago stopped being a matter of immigration enforcement. Instead, it's a campaign of organized brutality against the people of Minnesota by our own federal government. First, Donald Trump wants this chaos. He wants confusion. And yes, he wants more violence on our streets. We cannot give him what he wants. We must protest loudly, urgently, but also peacefully.
The Democrat Party has demeaned these individuals. They've even referred to them as Nazis and as the Gestapo. And that is absolutely leading to the violence we're seeing in the streets.
The White House condemning anti-law enforcement rhetoric and media coverage of anti-ICE protests, urging the public to turn to DHS for truthful information.
It says F ICE. Here's another one. And I'm pretty sure this car, you can't see it, said the best agent is a dead agent or something to that effect. This is despicable rhetoric that we're seeing. And the media is absolutely complicit in this violence.
Meanwhile, as the Iranian regime's bloody crackdown on anti-government protesters continues, Mike Waltz, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, says President Trump and the U.S. stand by the Iranian people.
Everyone in the world needs to know that the regime is weaker than ever before and therefore is putting forward this lie because of the power of the Iranian people in the streets. They are afraid. Enough is enough. We all have a responsibility to support the Iranian people and to put an end to the regime's neglect and oppression of the Iranian nation.
Waltz condemns the regime for its long list of human rights violations and for being the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. He also says the regime has continued to plot assassination attempts against President Trump and other senior U.S. government officials. This comes as Iranian state television reportedly broadcasts an image of President Trump during the 2024 Butler assassination attempt with the words, "This time the bullet won't miss."
President Trump is a man of action, not endless talk like we see at the United Nations. He has made it clear all options are on the table to stop the slaughter. And no one should know that better than the leadership of the Iranian regime.
What I will say with respect to Iran is that the president and his team have communicated to the Iranian regime that if the killing continues, there will be grave consequences.
Meanwhile, President Trump today met with the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, here at the White House. Machado confirming after that she presented President Trump in their afternoon meeting with her Nobel Peace Prize medal. And this is coming as the U.S. military this morning confirms the seizure of a 6th sanctioned oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. And just 1 day after President Trump called the interim president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, previously the vice president of Venezuela. He says that they talked oil, trade, minerals, and of course, reinforce national security and touts the relationship between Venezuela and the U.S. Tiff, back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. Does President Trump have grounds to invoke the Insurrection Act in Minnesota as protests escalate against ICE agents? Tune in for a panel debate tonight with Madeline Somerville and John Jordan at 7 p.m. Eastern on Capitol Report. The protests in Iran appear to have quieted down. This comes after 12,000 protesters were reportedly killed, and the Iranian regime continues mass arrests of individuals they call terrorists. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
Life in Tehran appeared to be business as usual on Thursday. The nationwide protest that began over the country's failing economy and later shifted to oppose the Iranian regime appeared to have quieted down. Iran International reported that over 12,000 of those protesters were killed, and the human rights activist news agency reported that over 18,000 had been arrested. Iranian police say they're still conducting mass arrests of people who allegedly damaged property during the protests. The Iranian regime has labeled those demonstrators as terrorists. A local resident shared his thoughts.
The situation in the bazaar has slightly improved. People come to shop a bit more, but generally the whole cost of living situation for people is weak, especially in shopping. But thankfully, the security situation is improving. People come out to shop a bit more.
But could things really be back to normal in Iran? Earlier in the day, Iran shut down its airspace for hours without explanation, which is something it did during its previous attacks against Israel. However, airspace appears to have reopened after domestic flights were seen in the air just after 7 a.m. local time. Also, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Iranian leaders have been wiring money to banks outside of Iran. And the U.S. Treasury Department on Thursday announced new sanctions against key Iranian leaders involved in the killing of protesters. Bessent gave this message to the protesters.
You are protesting for a noble cause, and the United States support you and your efforts to peacefully oppose the regime's mismanagement and brutality. Our message to the Iranian leaders is also clear. U.S. Treasury knows you're frantically wiring funds stolen from Iranian families to banks and financial institutions around the world.
Iran's exiled crown prince also shared a message, explaining how what he called a free Iran would act toward its neighbors.
Iran's nuclear military program will end. Support for terrorist groups will cease immediately. A free Iran will work with regional and global partners to confront terrorism, organized crime, drug trafficking, and extremist Islamism.
He added that a new Iran would immediately recognize the state of Israel. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Some European countries today sending soldiers to Greenland. President Trump is increasing calls to protect the island from adversaries, especially China and Russia. NTD's international correspondent Arian Postar has more.
I don't think troops in Europe impact the president's decision-making process, nor does it impact his goal of the acquisition of Greenland at all.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying the U.S. still plans to acquire Greenland, despite some European nations sending troops to the island.
Mesdames et messieurs, en vos grades et qualités.
French President Emmanuel Macron announcing that France is among the European nations sending troops to Greenland. Germany, France, Sweden, Norway, Finland and the Netherlands are sending military personnel as well. They say the goal is to begin preparations for large-scale military drills later this year.
Une première équipe de militaires.
A first team of French soldiers is already on site and will be reinforced in the coming days by land, air and sea means.
President Trump is increasing calls to protect the island from adversaries, especially China and Russia. According to Trump, Denmark, which controls Greenland, is not powerful enough to protect the strategically important island. The president therefore says the U.S. needs to own Greenland and has offered to purchase it. Leavitt says the U.S. had a meeting about such an acquisition on Wednesday and will continue having regular talks.
Those talks will take place, I'm told, every 2 to 3 weeks. So this is a conversation the administration intends to keep having.
She added that those talks will be between representatives from the U.S., Denmark and Greenland. Trump, who says he favors diplomacy, previously declined to rule out acquiring Greenland by force. Poland's prime minister on Thursday was asked how Europe would react to such a move by the US.
Czy Europa ma jakiś plan? Na takie sytuacje, proszę Państwa, nie ma planu.
Does Europe have a plan? Ladies and gentlemen, for such situations, there are no plans. I will do everything to ensure that Europe as a whole remains united.
He added that Poland isn't sending any troops to Greenland at this time. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Coming up, with Mayor Zohran Mamdani's victory in New York City, what's the future of the Democratic Party and what's the Democratic Party messaging heading into the midterms? Former Democratic presidential candidate Jason Palmer joins us to discuss after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. We have a special guest with us in studio tonight, Jason Palmer. He's a former Democratic presidential candidate and the founder of Together. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Tiffany, thanks for having me.
And since we're in New York City, actually, let's start with Mayor Zohran Mamdani's victory. He is a self-described democratic socialist. Yep. What do you make of his win and what that means for the future of the Democratic Party? Could we see more of this, spreading across the nation, or was this a one-off?
I think we will see more of this in terms of him being a young candidate, and we'll get more young people coming up in the 2026 elections, and then also all over the country in state elections. But on that same night, Governor Spanberger and also Governor Sherrill in New Jersey, both of them are more centrist-oriented, so there are going to be Democrats that are more Mamdani-like, and then there are going to be some that are more purple Democrats, which is a little bit more my flavor.
On that note, looking ahead to the midterms, riding on the midterms, what do you see as the maybe Democratic Party messaging heading into those?
Well, there's actually a big debate about that. Chuck Schumer has come out with his 3 C's, costs, chaos, and I believe corruption is the third one, but I haven't committed it fully to memory yet. There was also David Plouffe was writing an op-ed in the New York Times earlier today about what he thinks it should be. He thinks it should be about affordability. So right now, the Democratic Party does not have a united message. But the number one thing I would say to the Democratic Party is we need to focus on younger candidates, people who are in their 30s, people who have energy, passion. There's a reason why Mamdani is called a happy warrior. We need more happier warriors right now who are talking about things that people care about.
He definitely tapped into the social media sphere. He was great on that.
Huge.
So you are seeing that play. You have the White House on TikTok, for instance. There's a lot more push there. I do want to dig into something big that's being reported across the nation, and that is fraud, especially welfare fraud. You had Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying recently that 5 to 10% of total federal budget goes to fraud. That's based on the Government Accountability Office, which reports that is equal to $233 to $521 billion being lost annually. Now, as a businessman and entrepreneur yourself, how do you think this issue should be tackled to ensure that people's taxpayer dollars aren't going and being gobbled up by, these agencies?
Yeah, there definitely needs to be more inspectors general and more focus on actually rooting out the fraud. This has been going on, unfortunately, for decades across Republican and Democratic administrations. When I ran for president, I had modernizing government as one of the 3 pillars of my campaign. If you even go back to the 90s, Al Gore had reinventing government. Elon Musk was probably a little bit too much come in and break everything. But we do need to have somebody who's kind of a czar to look for all that fraud and to root it out with, big teams of accountants from some of the big 5 firms to actually come in and evaluate it. We know where a lot of the fraud comes from. In fact, you can even analyze it in Medicaid and Medicare. There are certain doctors who bill certain codes more and more than they should, and those are the ones that should be investigated, and those are the ones that, actually ended up being part of the Minnesota fraud as well.
Definitely a lot to watch for there, for sure. As you mentioned, affordability, of course, is a big issue. A lot of different ways on how to tackle that. You even had, President Trump saying, maybe limiting credit card interest rates, and kind of similar to what AOC and other people have been saying in the past. But what do you see as maybe the policies that Democrats are proposing to fix this?
Well, Elizabeth Warren was early to this in saying that credit card interest rates should be capped at 12%. Now Trump has said 10%. I do think, even though he called her the other day, I'm not sure this really will pass, but I'm hopeful something like that will pass. When I was on the campaign trail, I asked a lot of young people about the problems they had with housing, and they said it was the problem of having to pay the rent deposit and first and last months. So sort of a simple change in the rules to disallow landlords from charging both the deposit and first and last month, that could make things more affordable. More people could move out of their parents' homes, more people could get into those apartments that they want to. We need to look for little tweaks like that that actually make things more affordable. And there is an organization here, Kara Ekholm has been running something called Tech Fest in New York City for the last few years, which is to bring technology people into New York City government to actually use technology to find these types of little tweaks that can make the system better.
Sounds like there's some steps being taken there. I want to zoom out a bit if we can, because there's been a lot of hearings on Capitol Hill focused on countering the China threat. We actually just had one yesterday, seeing a lot of bipartisan support when it comes to staying ahead of China in terms of the AI arms race. What are some other areas you think we are seeing bipartisanship?
Well, when it comes to China, there is pretty strong bipartisan agreement that we need to stay ahead technologically. Now, President Trump has kind of gone off the reservation there a little bit, allowing the best NVIDIA chips to be sold to China when it before was under embargo. There's cybersecurity that we should be working together to make sure China doesn't get the best cybersecurity technologies and that we stay ahead there as well. And then drone technology. I mean, China's actually far ahead of us in terms of drones, and we need to catch up. So that's an area where we need to be spending more on R&D, and there are a number of people I know in the military who are part of task forces who are telling me that they're just not getting enough resources to actually upgrade our drone technology.
I will say very quickly, in terms of chips, it is the NVIDIA H200, which is not the best, which is Blackwell. But there are a lot of concerns about supercharging, or it could supercharge China's AI industry and what that means. Of course, the government is also getting a big chunk of the revenue from that. So
I think 25% or something like that.
We'll see how all of this plays out. But Jason Palmer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tiffany. Appreciate it.
Coming up, the Department of Homeland Security says an ICE agent in Minnesota had to fire his gun after he was attacked by 3 illegal immigrants. Jason Blair has what the White House and Governor Tim Walz are saying. And the U.S. government has filed warrants for dozens of sanctioned oil tankers, signaling it will continue to enforce its quarantine of Venezuelan oil exports. Luis Martinez brings us the latest when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says that the ICE agent involved in Wednesday night's shooting was attacked with a shovel and broomstick. And following an Insurrection Act threat from President Trump, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz makes an appeal to Trump, saying, quote, "Let's turn the temperature down." NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
Last night, what we saw was 3 individuals weaponize shovels and brooms and attack an ICE officer that had to defend himself.
The Department of Homeland Security says that an ICE agent was assaulted by 3 illegal immigrants on Wednesday night in Minnesota. The DHS says that in fear for his life, the ICE agent fired a defensive shot, hitting one of the suspects in the leg. All 3 suspects were arrested, and both the ICE agent and the injured suspect are in the hospital. Following the shooting, independent journalist Nick Sorter shared a video of vehicles allegedly belonging to federal agents being broken into and looted in Minneapolis. The vehicles were also vandalized and spray painted. One read, "Only good agent is a dead one." FBI Director Kash Patel announces a reward of up to $100,000 for info on these actions. And Thursday morning, President Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act in Minnesota if the, quote, "politicians of Minnesota don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists from attacking the patriots of ICE who are only trying to do their jobs." Later on Thursday, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz released a statement saying, "I am making a direct appeal to the president. Let's turn the temperature down, stop this campaign of retribution. It's not who we are." Walz also made an appeal to Minnesotans saying, "I know this is scary. We must speak out loudly, urgently, but also peacefully. We cannot fan the flames of chaos. That's what President Trump wants." Speaker of the House Mike Johnson responded to Trump's threat to invoke the Insurrection Act.
Minnesota is out of control. You have local and state leaders who seem to be encouraging violence, and the president's frustrated about it, and so are we.
Secretary Noem says that the Insurrection Act did come up in a conversation with the president on Thursday.
My hope is that this leadership team in Minnesota will start to work with us to get criminals off the streets. Remember, we are there in surged operations because of the largest fraud scheme in American history.
And when asked if there are any plans to pull operations out of Minnesota, Secretary Noem answered with a decisive no. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
President Trump vowing to deploy troops to Minnesota as unrest persists over immigration enforcement. What do everyday Americans think of the proposal? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the streets of D.C. to hear from the people.
President Trump is vowing to send federal troops to Minneapolis, to Minnesota. What do you make of that? Do you think the situation over there calls for this kind of action?
Well, I think with the civil unrest, perhaps it does. We've had 4 years of the other side and the unrest, and it seems to me that it's historical that the destruction exacerbated.
They're doing their job. You can't back down. And if he needs to support the ICE, then he should probably go ahead and bring more officials in to do it.
None of us want to see on the news people getting killed or people being tear gassed just because they're protesting about the ICE agents raiding their homes. This year's supposed to be a happy year, I want everybody to be happy that things are going the way they want to.
Well, if the governor and the mayor can't do it, then my understanding is that the president does have the power to bring in National Guard if they can't follow the law.
What do you think is driving the unrest that is happening right now in Minnesota?
Oh, it's the right versus left. Extreme right versus extreme left. They did the same thing back during the Trump first term when Portland was almost burned down. Defund the police and all that. It's the same thing.
I can understand perfectly why there's so much unrest there. ICE agents coming to your house. But what I don't understand is why you guys are pushing to the point where Trump is going to send National Guard members there.
I think it's intentional by underlying financial, by paying people to protest. There's nothing to be accomplished by that. There's a lot of fraud that's being revealed about that. And those who commit the fraud and the money that's going to Syria, to the countries that shouldn't be, that's a violation of law.
Obviously, the fraud, the facts of what's happened is certainly causing it, and people get exposed. And it seems to me that those that show compassion for the side that's extorting money, here again become the victims, and the American taxpayer appears to be the perpetrator, and it's just backward.
The U.S. government has seized a 6th oil tanker linked to Venezuela as part of its quarantine on sanctioned oil. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on the story.
The U.S. government, through Operation Southern Spear, has seized its 6th sanctioned oil tanker linked to Venezuela. The Veronica was boarded by U.S. Marines that launched from the USS Gerald S. Ford. The seizure comes as the U.S. government has filed warrants for dozens of tankers that are part of the shadow fleet that helped the Venezuelan regime export oil.
These actions send a clear signal to Russia, China, and Iran, and to the authoritarian regimes in South America who give them a foothold in our hemisphere. The United States is ready, willing, and capable of protecting our interests, especially those closest to home.
A bipartisan group of senators met with Maria Corina Machado, the Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner, during her visit to Washington, D.C.
Well, I think she's clearly going to become the president. I think the transition. I think that clearly Trump and Marco Rubio have a transition plan. And we know we'd all like it to happen in a day, but we are making progress. If you look at it, the political prisoners are being released, maybe not fast enough, get them all released. So I think we're heading in the right direction. There will be free and fair elections.
Senate Democratic leadership has signaled that they will continue to attempt to limit President Trump's power to take military action in Venezuela.
And Republicans in the Senate abdicated their responsibility and said, if you want to go to war in South America, go ahead. How does that look?
The other thing we're going to do is this. We're going to be filing a whole lot more war powers resolutions. They can run, but they can't hide. We're going to have votes on all of these, and they're going to have to whip these votes very hard. I know how hard they'll have to whip.
Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado pressed the U.S. senators and President Trump to demand the release of political prisoners still being held by the Venezuelan regime. Thus far, the Venezuelan regime has only released about 56 of the nearly 1,000 political prisoners it keeps behind bars. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
On Capitol Hill, a push from Democrats to limit President Trump's directives in Venezuela fails. It was very close to passing. NTD's Melina Weisskopf tells us what changed in the final hour.
After a very close vote and Vice President J.D. Vance making his way to Congress to cast a tie-breaking vote, Democrats failed to pass their War Powers Act, aimed at curbing the Trump administration's authority in Venezuela. Ultimately, 2 Republicans who initially voted in favor of opening the debate on the act decided in the final hour to switch their vote. Those were Senators Josh Hawley and Todd Young. They both said they were reassured by Secretary of State Marco Rubio that the U.S. military is not currently in Venezuela, and that if troops are needed on the ground for a major operation at any point, the administration will come to Congress first.
The Secretary also told me directly that the administration will not put ground troops into Venezuela. They do not seek to occupy Venezuela. But his commitment to abide by the War Powers notification procedures and also the Constitution is directly responsive to my concerns.
Senator Tim Kaine, the Democrat who led the charge on this War Powers Act, said though he's disappointed it didn't pass in the end, he felt like his push opened up a pathway to more discussion around the Venezuela action.
The White House made a number of public commitments to them about Senator Rubio coming finally to do a public hearing before Foreign Relations and the need for formal authorization if any boots on the ground are needed in Venezuela. These are not sufficient for me, but these were not things that we would have had we not filed this resolution.
The resolution, if approved by Congress, would have blocked President Trump from using military force within or against Venezuela. And when it was coming down to the vote yesterday, Senator Risch called a point of order because he said the resolution did not address future military actions, only current ones. He asserted that U.S. forces are not in Venezuela currently, so the point is moot. 3 Republicans still voted with Democrats, though those are Senators Rand Paul, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins. The president initially criticized those Republicans who voted to advance this resolution last week, saying that none of them should be reelected. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Coming up in college basketball, federal prosecutors allege another sports betting scandal, this one involving amateur athletes. Dave Martin joins us to discuss. And auto enthusiasts get a taste of new vehicles on the market at this year's Detroit Auto Show. David Lamb brings us a look at the latest lineup after the break. Now for your sports news, we have NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on. We've got NFL, some baseball news, but let's start in college basketball as federal prosecutors today have alleged another sports betting scandal. This one involves more than a dozen players, taking place over the past couple of seasons. Where did the scheme allegedly start?
Yeah, another day, another sports betting scandal here. Now, they allege this one actually started in the Chinese Basketball Associations back in 2023 with outside fixers, as they call them, winning there and then moving this same scheme over to the United States for college basketball. Now, they said this alleged scheme was basically the fixers recruiting players, giving them money in exchange for purposely, not playing well in a certain game, and then the fixers would bet against those players' teams, knowing that they would not be at their best. Now, this scheme involved, at this point, at least 39 players on 17 different college basketball teams, rigging the outcome of at least 29 games. Now, they said this is ongoing, so these numbers could be updated eventually. They said this involves some teams in big conferences like the Big East and the Atlantic 10, but none of the Power 4 conferences, though, were actually mentioned. They actually gave some details to it, how they enticed some of these players, sending them photos of stacks of cash to kind of entice them. Prosecutors say the charges range from bribery, wire fraud, and conspiracy. And like I said, the investigation is still ongoing. So we've had the baseball one, we've had the NBA one, now the college basketball one. Nothing from the NFL yet, anyway.
Yet.
Yet.
Well, you were actually in the courtroom today. What was that like?
Yeah, well, I was in the courtroom for the baseball fraud case. Yeah, we just mentioned with the 2 baseball players there, and then. Yeah, we were, it was a status conference, so nothing big was going on there. The 2 players have already pled not guilty. The trial doesn't actually start until May, so there were no major fireworks going on today. But both of those players were there today, so it was kind of interesting anyway to see them in the courtroom. Anyway, I'll say that. And it was nice and cool outside the courtroom, I can tell you that.
It is very cold today. As you were pointing out, that this is the third major sports betting case that's been unveiled over the past few months. One of the others involved a pair of Major League Baseball players, as you were just saying there. Have prosecutors commented on whether these cases are related?
Yeah, they were actually asked about that. Prosecutors said they weren't aware of any relation with the baseball betting scandal and this NCAA basketball scandal. Now, the baseball scandal kind of alleges different kinds of bets, mainly prop bets, that whether the pitch was going to be a ball or a strike, or what speed it was going to be at, or where a certain pitch would be located, a ball or strike. It really called the game within the game. Now, the college basketball scheme alleges just the winner of the game and whether they beat the point spread or not. But back to the baseball case, those players, they're essentially really on double trial right now. You've got the federal prosecutor's case against them, but surely Major League Baseball is doing their own investigation. It's going to be completely independent, I'm sure, from whatever the federal prosecutors find of the outcome of that case. I mean, even if there's a chance that even if they're found innocent in this actually trial, that baseball could still find evidence to say you violated the integrity of the game. And we've seen what's happened in the past. Pete Rose, maybe the most famous case in the late 80s, getting banned for betting on sports, and he was banned for life, couldn't play, couldn't coach, couldn't be involved in any Major League Baseball team, wasn't even eligible for the Hall of Fame. So it's a big deal, of course. It's two big deals they've really got going on right now.
And on that note, is there more sense of the impact of this? Like, is there that lack of trust now developing in different teams, perhaps?
I would certainly think so. After the first one, that NBA one, I remember someone asked me that, and I thought, well, this is only a few players. It didn't really seem that bad, and actually two of them were coaches at the time. Then, 2 weeks later, we had the Major League Baseball one involving a couple of players. Now we've got this basketball, and we had an inkling of this was coming because there was a couple months ago, 2 players were already charged, and I think they were actually part of this investigation. So I would say that it's probably safe to say that, yeah, there is a significant amount of doubt going on right now. Of course, the Supreme Court made sports betting legal in 2018. They actually made it a state right back then. That was 2018, so 7 years ago. So it's not unreasonable to think that was probably part of this too, I would think.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of money on the line, as we always like to say here. Speaking of money, shifting gears to the NFL now, multiple outlets are reporting that the New York Giants are expected to hire John Harbaugh as their next head coach.
Yes, they would do well to get John Harbaugh. I'm still shocked the Ravens let go of him. Apparently, a lot of NFL teams were interested in Harbaugh. Now, his agent said 45 minutes after Harbaugh was fired from the Ravens, they got 7 calls from teams, inquiring about hiring him. Meanwhile, at the time, there were only 6 head coach openings, so maybe someone with a coach already under contract was reaching out, who knows. But because of that demand, it is reasonable to think that Harbaugh has kind of been able to pick and choose here the best fit for him. The Giants would certainly be attractive because they've got a very good young quarterback in Jackson Dart. They've got some good skill players there on offense as well and on defense. Plus, they'll have another high draft pick in this year's draft, the 5th overall pick. In any case, though, this has not yet been confirmed by the team or the coach, so it's still sources say at this point.
And sources are saying it also comes with a giant paycheck.
Yeah, I saw that. 5 years, $100 million. I mean, he'd be like the 3rd highest person on the whole team, which is somewhat rare for these sports. I mean, most of them are most players are getting paid a ton of money, obviously. I was very surprised to see that, though. So, again, allegedly. But we saw what allegedly happened, because that Anthony Davis news that we were talking about Tuesday, we then had to correct the next day because apparently another doctor said, you know what, you can go without the surgery. At least that's what I got from ESPN anyway.
We'll see if these sources are right.
So I think these are right. I'm going to trust them.
While looking at the NFL's playoffs, the Seattle Seahawks have suddenly listed quarterback Sam Darnold as questionable for Saturday's game against San Francisco. What happened here?
I'm asking that question myself, too. I mean, this is definitely something new. Darnold was not on the injury report on Tuesday or Wednesday. Today, he's suddenly questionable with an oblique injury. Now, maybe he suffered it in practice. We don't know yet. But this would be a major problem for Seattle if he could not play against the 49ers Saturday in the playoffs. Now, he hasn't missed a game this year or last year. Seahawks do have Drew Lock as his backup. He's attempted just 3 passes this season. Darnold, meanwhile, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He was named to the Pro Bowl this year, ranked in the top 10 in several statistical categories. Now, on the other side of the field, the San Francisco 49ers will not be able to activate All-Pro linebacker Fred Warner for Saturday's game. Warner had been on injured reserve really for most of the season. He's only played in 6 of the 17 games with an ankle injury. He was listed as a limited participant in practice this week on Wednesday, so it would seem he's getting closer to returning, but they don't feel he's quite there yet. So a big loss possibly for both teams here, but I think it'll still be a good game too.
Does that up the odds in favor of any of the teams to win?
If Seattle does not have Sam Darnold at quarterback, it completely changes it. I mean, quarterback is the most crucial position, and no team has like 2 good quarterbacks. You couldn't afford really 2 good quarterbacks, and you wouldn't take, if you already have a good quarterback, there's no way you'd take a first-round pick on one there too. So it's, yes, I would say that would certainly affect it, Tiff, in my opinion. So questionable, that usually means 50-50, so we'll see what happens. But it is very concerning that all of a sudden this just came up right now. Maybe it was a delayed reaction to an injury Sunday. I don't know. I've never actually heard of that happening, but possibly could be. Who knows?
Thinking we need a new chart behind you to start listing injuries for all the sports.
Oblique, ACL, yes. If you follow sports, you get to know a lot of these medical terms a lot. Whether you actually know what that means, though, it might be a whole different thing. I can at least list them. Where the oblique is, I'm not quite sure on that, though, Tiff. Stomach area, is that right?
Well, we'll also put up a human body behind you, a diagram.
Maybe we'll bring on a medical doctor with me here to correct every time I'm wrong. That would be
We can have a new segment.
Yeah, what Dave
Sports
got wrong
and medical analysis.
Dr. Drew up here. That would be funny.
Anyway, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Tiff.
The annual auto show in Detroit, Michigan returns with new vehicles and experiences. NTD got a close-up look on the first day of the event. NTD's David Lamb has more.
Auto enthusiasts are getting behind the wheel at this year's Detroit Auto Show. The event brings together major automotive players, indoor tracks, interactive experiences, and high-end vehicles. It began on Wednesday and runs for 11 days at the Huntington Place in Detroit. Kurt McAllister of Toyota shows us the electrification of the popular RAV4 SUV.
This vehicle now is purely hybrid. So we no longer have a gas variant, we just have hybrids and plug-in hybrids. So the hybrids are entering the dealerships now, the plug-ins will enter in the spring.
Toyota says almost half of the new cars it sells now are hybrid vehicles, as much of the U.S. car industry moves toward electrification. And Jeep revealed the first and only all-electric trail-rated vehicle on the market.
I think that there are specific buyers that still want an all-electric vehicle, and I think that this is a great option for them, especially if they're already a Jeep vehicle. As this is a Jeep vehicle, you'll notice here we do have that iconic 7-slot grille, but it is illuminated, and I think that's one of my favorite parts of this vehicle when we're looking at the exterior.
Well, the hybrid is the best of both worlds that we put on this Cherokee, because you can always fill up. You have the full 500 miles of range, but still the fuel efficiency beyond that of just a gas vehicle.
Ford says it's been off to a great start in 2026 and showcased its Bronco model. It's also donating 5 specialized vehicles to search and rescue organizations. Bill Ford says the company is thinking about customers.
Can you engineer vehicles that are fundamentally lower cost so that you can pass that on to the customer? And that's what we're doing.
On Friday, American singer Robin Thicke is headlining the event's charity preview. The gala is expected to benefit 6 children's charities in Southeast Michigan. The Detroit Auto Show ends on January 25th. David Lamb, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.